Imagine sitting in a one-on-one meeting with your boss. You're casually going over the week's agenda, and suddenly they reach across the desk, pick up a lethal weapon, and hurl it directly at your head.
Yeah, and the absolute worst part is that you still have to show up for work the next day.
Right, exactly. Well, may you find clarity, peace, and purpose in whatever challenges you are facing right now. And may your week ahead be deeply blessed. Because today, you and I are digging into a toxic workplace survival guide written, 3,000 years ago.
It really is a survival guide, yeah.
It is. Welcome to our deep dive. Today, we're opening up 1 Samuel chapter 18. We'll be pulling from the extensive historical and literary analysis found in the Holman and NAA study Bibles to decode the immediate aftermath of David killing Goliath.
Yeah, we definitely aren't going to rehash the slingshot story today. I mean, you already know that one.
Yeah, exactly. Our mission today is to figure out what happens the day after you achieve sudden, impossible success. We are looking at a masterclass in how rapid success acts almost like an autoimmune disease within an insecure administration.
Right, it causes a leader to just actively destroy their own kingdom. It's a terrifying psychological study, really.
It's like a young, brilliant intern suddenly going viral and completely outshining the company's veteran CEO.
That's exactly it. When you take a young, untested individual from the margins of society, like the sheep pastures, and suddenly inject them into the epicenter of national power, it completely shatters the existing equilibrium. Every single relationship in the royal court just has to be instantly renegotiated.
So let's start with the most baffling renegotiation of them all, which is Jonathan. The text sets up this immediate bond between King Saul's son, Jonathan, and David.
Yeah, they have this intense, immediate connection.
Right. And I want to challenge the conventional wisdom here. Because we usually just gloss over this as a beautiful ancient friendship. But if we look at the raw political mechanics, Jonathan is the crown prince. He is the heir apparent.
Very true. He has everything to lose.
Exactly. Stripping off his royal robe, his armor, his sword, and his bow, and literally handing them over to a teenage shepherd who just went viral. I mean, that doesn't sound like spiritual humility to me. It sounds like political suicide.
It really does look that way on paper.
Right. Was Jonathan just incredibly naive about how power works?
Not in the slightest, actually. In the ancient Near East, personal military gear, especially gear belonging to the royal family, was the ultimate, undeniable symbol of office.
Okay, so it carried a lot of weight.
Immense weight.
Yeah.
By transferring those specific items, Jonathan is executing a formal, recognized abdication of his right to the throne. The historical analysis points out that the phrasing used here is incredibly specific.
The part about their souls being knit together.
Yes, exactly. The text says, Jonathan's soul was knit to David's. This echoes the profound, almost supernatural bond between the biblical patriarch Jacob and his son Benjamin. It implies a loyalty that completely supersedes bloodlines and political ambition.
Oh, wow. So it's less about being a supportive friend and more about, I guess, recognizing a cosmic shift in management.
Precisely. Jonathan is reading the room on a spiritual level, He recognizes that the divine mandate has shifted away from his own family line and directly onto David.
So rather than fighting a losing battle against destiny, he just voluntarily yields.
Right. What makes Jonathan a complete anomaly in ancient history is his total lack of ego. Power in antiquity was held onto with a literal death grip. Royal families assassinated each other over the slightest chance at the throne.
Yeah, you read about that all the time. It's cutthroat. So frame this with a current practical example for us.
Well, imagine a CEO's chosen successor literally handing over their executive keycard in corner office to a junior employee, just out of sheer spiritual conviction.
That is staggering. How shocking must this visual have been to the rest of the royal court?
Oh, they must have been absolutely speechless. It sets up a fascinating baseline, though. You have the son who has every right to feel threatened, gracefully leaning into the new reality.
Right, and then you have the father, King Saul, who has a completely different reaction. And the catalyst for the father's mental collapse isn't a military defeat or a coup. It's essentially a piece of ancient pop culture.
Yes, the infamous victory song. It all starts over a literal song.
Which is so wild. Describe that scene for us.
So as the army is returning from battle, the women of the cities come out to celebrate. They are dancing with tambourines and chanting a very specific lyric. They sing, Saul struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s.
Which feels like a massive insult if you are the commander-in-chief.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's like watching your deputy manager get triple the engagement on social media for a project that you authorize. Saul hears this and completely unravels.
He does. He becomes indignant and incredibly paranoid, completely convinced that David is now gunning for the crown itself. He literally says, what more can he have but the kingdom?
From that day forward, Saul views David with deep suspicion. But if we dig into the literary context of that song from the study notes, Saul is actually misinterpreting the entire situation, isn't he?
He is radically misinterpreting it, yeah. The literary analysis in the Holman and NAA sources explains that the women were utilizing a very standard device in ancient Hebrew poetry.
Which is what exactly?
It's called parallelism. We see this structure all over the place in the texts, like in Deuteronomy chapter 32. In this type of poetry, pairing the concepts of thousands and 10,000s isn't a mathematical comparison at all.
So it isn't a ranking system where they are literally checking the body count and deciding David is 10 times better than Saul.
Right, not at all. They aren't trying to elevate David at Saul's expense. It is a unified celebration of military excellence. They're honoring the king and his champion together.
So the two numbers are just meant to complement each other.
Exactly, amplifying the total scale of the victory. But Saul's internal insecurity acts like a prism, bending this cultural poem of praise into a direct personal threat.
This is where that autoimmune analogy really takes shape for me. Saul has just been handed the greatest military asset in a generation.
Unquestionably, David is the ultimate defense mechanism for the kingdom of Israel right now.
But because Saul's ego is so fragile, his administrative brain misidentifies this healthy defense cell as a lethal virus. He starts attacking the very thing keeping him safe. Why do leaders do this? Why would someone rather jeopardize their entire organization than share the spotlight?
Well, it happens the moment a leader's primary objective shifts from the success of the mission to the preservation of their own status.
Wow, that's a sharp way to put it.
It's true, though. Once preservation becomes the goal, competence just becomes a threat. Saul can no longer view David's victories as a win for Israel. He can only view them as a deduction from his own political capital.
And that internal paranoia quickly bleeds out into physical violence. The environment around Saul becomes incredibly toxic, like very literally.
A very dangerous workplace.
Right. The sources describe an evil spirit from God rushing upon Saul, causing him to rave frantically in his house. And David is just there trying to do his job. He's playing the lyre, essentially providing music therapy to calm the king's nerves.
And that's when Saul completely snaps.
He takes a spear and hurls it at David's head. Twice. He actively tries to pin him to the wall. Now, the Holman notes attribute this violent outburst to a very specific emotion, which is fear.
Yes, the text explicitly notes that Saul was afraid of David.
I need you to unpack the mechanics of that for me, because on paper, that makes no sense. Saul is the one with the crown, the standing army, and the literal spear in his hand. Why is he terrified of a teenager playing a harp?
Because authority and power are two very different things, and Saul has just realized he only possesses one of them.
Oh, that is fascinating.
Right, Saul has the institutional authority, the title of king. But it is undeniably obvious to everyone in the room that the actual power, the divine favor, and operational success, it all rests entirely with David. God had departed from Saul.
So the fear comes from a sudden, hollow realization of his own impotence.
Exactly. The violence is a desperate overcompensation. When leaders feel that profound internal emptiness and realize their authority is a facade, they almost always resort to raw, physical intimidation to manufacture a sense of control.
It is the ultimate display of weakness. We complain about passive-aggressive emails today, but imagine your boss literally throwing projectiles at your head during a one-on-one meeting. Throwing things doesn't prove you are in charge. It proves you have lost complete control of the narrative.
It really does.
And what is incredible here is David's emotional regulation. He evades the spear twice, but he doesn't throw it back. He maintains his composure.
Which, ironically, only accelerates Saul's terror. Because physical murder by spear failed, and because he can't just execute a national hero in his living room without triggering a massive civilian revolt, Saul has to change tactics.
Right. He pivots from erratic violence to cold, calculated bureaucratic sabotage. He moves him out of the C-suite, basically.
Yes, a strategic demotion. Saul decides he can't even stand to look at David anymore. So he removes him from his direct presence in the royal court and demotes him. He makes David a field commander over 1,000 men, sending him out to the front lines.
The strategy here is all about plausible deniability, isn't it?
Completely. Saul hopes that by placing David in a position of constant, heavy combat against the Philistines, the law of averages will eventually catch up with him. He's using the military structure to do his dirty work.
So if the Philistines kill David, Saul solves his political crisis and still gets to deliver a beautiful eulogy for a fallen national hero, keeping his own hands completely clean.
That's the plan. It's the ancient equivalent of a manager assigning a rival the most doomed, impossible project in the company, fully expecting them to fail and get fired.
But the strategy spectacularly backfires.
Yeah.
David doesn't just survive the front lines, he completely thrives. The text emphasizes that David behaves prudently in all his ways. How should we understand that concept of prudence in this specific context? Because he isn't just being cautious, right?
Right. Biblical prudence here isn't about timidity at all. It is about a profound, divinely guided operational wisdom. Despite being unfairly targeted, demoted, and placed in incredibly lethal environments, David doesn't act out of spite.
He doesn't get reckless trying to prove himself.
No, not at all. He executes his military duties with exceptional tactical skill and moral steadiness. And the result is that his success rate actually goes up.
He just keeps winning. It's like that rival winning an industry award for the doomed project you gave them.
Right.
Saul tries to bury him in the trenches, but all he actually accomplishes is giving David a massive public stage to prove his leadership capabilities directly to the troops.
Yes, and all of Israel and Judah end up loving David even more because they see him leading them out into battle and bringing them back safely every single day.
This is the tragic irony of Saul's methodology, right? Every single move he makes to diminish David inadvertently magnifies David's standing with the public. Saul is hemorrhaging the very political capital he is so desperately trying to protect.
And that backs Saul into a corner where he feels he has to utilize his most ruthless, cold-blooded strategy yet. Since military probability isn't killing David naturally, Saul decides to weaponize his own family.
This part is just incredibly dark. The sources outline this sequence regarding Saul's daughters. First, he offers his older daughter, Merab, to David in marriage. But there's a catch. David must continue to fight the Lord's battles, and the text reveals Saul's internal thought process. He says to himself, "Let the hand of the Philistines be against him."
He is using the promise of a royal marriage as literal bait. Saul knows David is brave, perhaps even ambitious, and he assumes David will take increasingly absurd risks in combat to prove he is worthy of marrying a princess.
But David sidesteps the trap with humility. He essentially says, "Who am I, and what is my family's pedigree that I should be the king's son-in-law?" He refuses to let ego drive his battlefield decisions. So ultimately, Merab is given to another man entirely, Adriel.
That abrupt withdrawal is a calculated public slight. It is designed to humiliate David, to provoke him into an emotional outburst or a rash mistake. But again, David's prudence holds. He remains entirely steady.
So Saul tries again, and this time the setup is even more sinister. Saul discovers that his younger daughter, Michal, is genuinely in love with David. Now pause for a second. If you are a normal father and you find out your daughter is in love with the most successful, popular young commander in the nation, you are thrilled.
Right, it's a perfect match on paper.
Exactly. But Saul is actually pleased by this for a completely twisted reason. The text says he explicitly views her love as a snare, a trap for David.
This is where we see the total collapse of Saul's moral compass. When paranoia takes deep root in a leader's mind, empathy is always the first casualty.
That is profound.
It is sad but true. Saul cannot see his daughter's genuine affection, and he cannot see David's unwavering loyalty. He only sees leverage. He views his own children purely as tactical pawns on a chessboard.
Let me challenge the logic of how Saul executes this trap, though. He has his servants secretly pressure David, acting as middlemen, telling David how much the king and the court love him.
The manipulation is layered.
Very layered. When David again points out his reality that he is a poor man and simply cannot afford the exorbitant royal bride price required to marry into the family, Saul sets a customized alternative dowry. He demands 100 Philistine foreskins. Why that specific morbid request? Why not just ask for 100 enemy helmets or swords?
It comes down to undeniable proof of the kill. And it highlights just how calculating Saul's madness has become. The Israelites practiced circumcision, but the Philistines did not. So by demanding this specific biological proof, Saul is guaranteeing that David cannot simply go out and kill local mercenaries or even other Israelites to pay the toll. He has to engage in intense, close quarters, lethal combat, specifically with the Philistine army.
Saul is literally pricing the dowry in blood.
Exactly. Mathematically, he expects that surviving 100 consecutive hand-to-hand engagements is impossible. He is weaponizing a legal cultural custom to orchestrate a state-sponsored assassination.
It is breathtakingly dark. Think about it as the darkest wedding registry imaginable. He is entirely willing to make his own daughter a grieving widow before she even gets to the altar, just to solve a political headache.
It really shows his mental state. He has stripped away every ounce of his own humanity in the pursuit of maintaining control, and he genuinely believes he has finally outsmarted the system.
He thinks David's honor will force him to accept the challenge.
Right, and that the statistical reality of war will finally take him out.
But, as is the theme of this entire chapter, Saul thinks he has finally backed David into a fatal corner, but David over-delivers. He doesn't just scrape by and survive. He doesn't just get the 100 foreskins. David and his men go out, they kill 200 Philistines, and they bring the full double price directly to the king.
Which creates an inescapable public trap for Saul.
Exactly. Saul made a public royal decree. David fulfilled the terms of that decree publicly and overwhelmingly. Saul now has absolutely no political maneuverability left. He is utterly trapped by his own scheme and is forced to hand his daughter Michal over to David in marriage.
This is where the narrative analysis really shines a light on the ultimate consequences of toxic leadership. Let's look at the final, tangible results of Saul's campaign of sabotage. The text notes two undeniable facts that Saul has to swallow. First, that the Lord is unequivocally with David, and second, that his own daughter Michal deeply loves David.
So by trying to completely destroy his rival, Saul has permanently cemented David into the royal family structure.
Yes, he built the exact bridge he was trying to burn. He handed David the legitimacy of the royal bloodline.
It's incredible, and the psychological toll on Saul is devastating. The chapter concludes by noting that Saul grew even more afraid and became David's enemy forever. His internal torment is now a permanent fixture. He has locked himself in a prison of his own making.
Meanwhile, David just continues to do his job. His name becomes highly esteemed across the entire nation.
It is such a stark, brutal contrast. You have David navigating an impossibly hostile environment by maintaining his composure, his operational wisdom, and his humility. And then you have Saul, who possesses all the institutional power in the world, yet completely unravels.
Saul tries to ruthlessly micromanage and force his own desired outcome through manipulation and violence, and in doing so, he guarantees the loss of everything he is trying to protect.
Exactly. It's a striking lesson that trying to ruthlessly control everything usually guarantees you will lose everything. He pushes his own son to hand over the armor to his rival, he alienates his military base, and he legally marries his daughter off to the very man he fears most.
It is the ultimate lesson in how unchecked insecurity dismantles leadership from the inside out. The more a leader tries to violently grip onto their authority, the faster it slips through their fingers.
It really is a dense, emotionally heavy piece of history that resonates perfectly with the dynamics of power we see every single day in modern life. We started by looking at Jonathan's selfless, unprecedented handover of power. We explored how a misinterpreted song can act as an autoimmune trigger for a fragile ego. We navigated the terrifying reality of flying spears in a toxic environment, and finally we saw how a deadly, manipulative dowry completely collapsed on the architect who designed it.
The mechanics of human nature really haven't changed in 3,000 years, have they?
Not one bit. So for you listening, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over as you step back into your own life and your own challenges based on these sources. At some point, you're going to be faced with the rapid, unexpected success of someone else. Maybe a coworker, a friend, or a family member who suddenly outshines you. When that moment comes, which underlying mechanism will you let drive your reaction? Do you act like Jonathan, willingly handing over your armor in support, or do you act like Saul, desperately reaching for a spear? God blesses all the listeners.